Learn why the town called her the crazy lady, why a cashier cautioned me once the coast was clear, and how a man named Tom saw through my disguise. Welcome to No Bow Tie, where we conquer emptiness and frustration, discover our uniqueness, and live with relentless joy. I'm John No Bow Tie Swoboda, author and musician. Today, we're going to talk about the filters that are placed in your mind that either limit or set free everything in your future. Be sure to subscribe. It becomes a real problem in your life when you're not aware that you're seeing everything according to how you've been raised, how you've been taught to see life. When you're not aware of that, you will continue to build your future as you had your past. Your future does not need to be your past. It needs to grow. It needs to get out of those filters and see the world a new way. One of the ways that we're bombarded is by our environment, our friends, our influences, and mainly the world around us. For example, my wife and I were down in Council Grove, Kansas, little bitty town, dusty town. We're going for a bike ride. We decided to go to the nearby cafe to get a bite to eat. And before I go in, I can hear a lady's voice inside talking high-pitched and loud. We open the door, and everybody's sitting quietly except her. And she makes eye contact with me, and she says, "Praise God, can I hug you?" I said, "Sure. How can I pass that up?" She comes over, she gives me a bear hug, and she had to be 75, 80 years old. We go and we sit down and eat. On the way out, we see her again, and she comes over just praising God and telling us all about the good life in heaven and how she wore her clothes today because she is not going to be looking in rags when Jesus comes up to take her away. I remembered that I'd left my bike helmet on the table. I went in to get it, and the cashier, she looked at me, she said, "Sorry about that. We tried to get her stopped. We call her the crazy lady. She does this all day long." So I left. We went on a bike ride. I asked my wife, I said, "So do you think she's a crazy lady?" And Myra said, "Well, only you can decide." And I thought about you. If I describe to you a very inspired woman whose energy is lighthearted and loving, and you could find her in that town, you would find her. But if I described to you a crazy lady, you'd find her just the same because of the filter that was placed in your mind upon my description. Now think about how many things are embedded in your mind by someone else's description. You cannot go to a restaurant without somebody else already planting a seed in your mind of what to expect. Or to go to a movie or a relationship, meeting people, going to a party, getting ready to vote politically, going to church. All of these things, we have seeds planted in our mind. It's important to erase all of that and observe with your own fortitude, your own imagination to build from that moment on so that you can create the future of that situation that you want to create. If I ever go back to that town, I will thank her because of her inspiration. She opened my mind to get that filter out between me and you so that I'm not judging you, so that I'm observing you to learn. And think about how you've been raised. You cannot help but to be raised to stereotype certain people and what they can offer you in this world and what they may be offering in general in this world. And there's always a judgment. We do it to protect ourselves, and we do it so that we feel secure in the environment. Take this story as an example. I was at a training session out in the desert, a 3-day intense get to know yourself training session. It's all about interaction with other people and who you are in that environment. And when I walked in, there was one thing I knew for sure. I did not like Tom. I didn't like the way he walked. I didn't like the way he talked. I didn't like the way he carried himself. I didn't like the things he said. And it was all because of a filter that had been planted in my mind early on. I did not have to team up with Tom, but we were always observing each other throughout the training. And at the end of the training, we were given the opportunity one at a time, to speak as emotionally as we wanted about what we had learned and how we had grown. My little speech was just delivering the changes that I saw in myself and how I was so inspired to move on in life. When it came to Tom, and he pointed at me, and he said, "And you, Mr. Swoboda, I did not like you when I came in this class." He said, "I didn't like the way you walked. I didn't like the way you talked. I didn't like anything about you, and I didn't like the way you looked. I especially didn't like that you're a guitar player." Can you imagine what I learned about my judgment, my automatic judgment of him? I did that to him without ever knowing the guy. We all have seeds planted that are going to filter how we see the people that we're interacting with. And it's getting in your way on a daily basis. When you look over at a person, you can't help but to judge who they are and how they are, and probably who they voted for. There's an emotional response that follows that makes you think you've summed up who they are. Take a moment and double check that filter. Get that feeling to change on the inside of you and change it from a judgment to an observation. Now, we all agree that we have these filters in place, and you probably know, you probably have had some reflection of how these filters are getting in the way of your life. And it's pretty human to defend ourselves by saying, yeah, but, that's just the way I am, or yeah, that's how they really are. How do you step up to the plate and be able to use this kind of knowledge while it's happening? One thing that I did, I worked for me, and I think it will work for you in your setting. When my wife and I would go to do a performance, a musical performance, I said, let's play a little game. Let's talk about what we think is going to happen. Let's get our filter out there. I would say, let's write these down. Here's what I think is going to happen. Okay. And I would throw out how many people would be there, how they would respond, what the person that hired us would be like, every aspect of it that I could. And we'd write down just little notes about it. And she would do the same. And often they would differ. So already our filters are blocking our reality. And then we would go and play the gig. And afterward, on the way home, we'd say, all right, let's compare notes. Now, the reason this is a solution to the problem is I became just totally stripped down of believing that my premonition was true, that it held any weight. Because every time, you guessed it, I was wrong. And every time I left having had a better experience than I thought. So we drive home and compare notes. The main thing was it always differed from what we thought. And if it did line up, well, great. But it was few and far between. So now you know the filters are blocking your view of life. You know that it bothers you down to the core to live in such a limited way, but you also know a solution. And that solution is to just have a method to think about what you're thinking about and then compare it to the reality. And when the reality is happening, get all of those prejudgments out of the way. They're not helping you to live a great life. We're running out of time. Next week, I'm going to talk about the cognition facility and how the processes can be controlled to help you gain that momentum while it's happening. Now, I'm going to leave you with a little tasty gift of my own. I'm going to play a piece by Francisco Tarrega in my own style, my own uniqueness, which I dearly love and hope that you love it too. This is called Capriccio Arabe. This is called Capriccio Arabe.